Namaste, Jai Swaminarayan. In the previous video, we spoke about the role of the Satpurush, a being that personifies and propagates truth. The association of the Satpurush helps one develop Vivek, or the ability to decipher truth amidst ignorance, and thus strengthens one's endeavor for moksha. We had also begun to discuss what it is that distinguishes a Satpurush from a jiva, and why a Satpurush endowed with dharma, gnan, vairagya, and bhakti is uniquely qualified to be honored, trusted, and obeyed. Now, despite incredible greatness, the Satpurush often, but effortlessly, tolerates taunts and insults from even the most lowly of men. Why is that? The Satpurush brings forth truth, and sometimes when a jiva encounters truth, the jiva must also confront the ignorance it has adopted to that point. Now, this experience can be traumatic, frustrating, and humiliating. However, when the jiva seeks refuge in the Satpurush, the moment becomes one of monumental growth. As we alluded to in the last video, when an aspirant develops a profound association with the Satpurush, one that is characterized by mutual trust, one can overcome personal shortcomings on the path to Vivek in moksha. Bhagwan Swaminarayan explains what this looks like from a jiva's perspective. One who has Vivek accepts whatever words of advice God and the Sant offer as the highest truth, but does not doubt their words in any way. Thus, when the Sant tells him, "You are distinct from the mind, body, indriyas, and prans, you are Satya. You are the knower of the body, indriyas, and prans, which are all asatya." He accepts this to be the truth. He then behaves as the Atma, distinct from them all, but never follows the instincts of his own mind. Complete trust in the words of Bhagwan and the Satpurush. This is how an aspirant gains personally relevant insight into understanding how to behave as the Atma, foregoing the inclinations of the mind. The mind has an important role in spiritual endeavors. However, on its own, the mind is tragically flawed when it comes to trying to overcome personal shortcomings, ones that are specific to our attachment to transient objects. The mind, after all, is one of those transient objects. And so the jiva's dependence on the mind and attachment to it and all other transient objects requires spiritual examination and correction. This is the essence of the Satpurush's influence on a spiritual aspirant. If the jiva does not identify attachment to transient objects and the need to detach from them, it continues to flounder in ignorance. In the second chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains a chain of events that link attachment to the adulteration of the mind. Krishna says, contemplation on transient objects leads to attachment for them. Attachment spurs desire and lust to obtain those objects. Desires left unsatisfied lead to anger. Anger leads to delusion and decisions that further ignorance. Delusion erodes self-discipline and self-awareness. And the loss of self-awareness erodes all forms of spiritual knowledge. So attachment and ignorance thus return the jiva to the cycle of rebirth. The jiva's attachment to transient objects prevents the jiva from accepting truth, despite encountering it over and over. When Hanumanji escaped Ravan's capture and returned to Ram, Ravan faced imminent danger. Ravan still, however, had a chance for redemption. His wife, Mandodari, had grown fearful from what she astutely realized from Hanumanji's brief reconnaissance trip to Lanka. She tried to convince Ravan to return Sitaji back to Ram and save their people. Ravan brushed her aside and summoned his council. He wanted to hear his people reconfirm his superiority. When his brother Vibhishan arrived, he asked his brother to share his thoughts on their current situation. Emboldened by, his past sanskars, his respect and friendship with Hanumanji, and his renewed faith in Ramchandra Bhagwan, Vibhishan laid into Ravan's mistakes on principle and without attacking Ravan on a personal level. With humility, he did his best to explain Ramchandraji's true identity and urged Ravan to not continue on the path to self-destruction. Vibhishan spoke with Vivek, with words that had approval of the wise, the Purans, and the Veds. Ravan was furious. "You wretch," Ravan said. "Your death is imminent now, fool. You live off of my generosity, and yet, you imbecile, you favor my enemy's cause? Tell me, is there anyone in this world I have failed to conquer by the strength in my arms? You live in my capital and cherish love for those hermits? Go and join hands with them. Become their guru and teach them your truth." With these words, Ravan kicked Vibhishan, physically kicked him. And Vibhishan bowed repeatedly to his brother's feet. In the Ramcharitmanas, at this point in the story, Shankar Bhagwan takes an aside to tell Parvatiji that this is the true greatness of the Satpurush, for he responds to evil with good. "It is good that you have beaten me," Vibhishan said to Ravan, "for you are like a father to me. But for your welfare, my lord, your welfare lies in devotion to Sri Ram." With these words, Vibhishan stood before the entire gathered assembly and pronounced Sri Ram's strength and resolve. He declared the council's impending doom and then his own intention of seeking Ram's protection. This was the point of no return for Ravan. Ravan had lived an incredible life. He had a genius intellect, massive physical strength, talent, wit, charisma. From a worldly standpoint, he was the complete man and conqueror of worlds. But Ravan could not conquer the ignorance and attachment that all Jeeves must overcome for moksha. Ravan had the opportunity, as he had come into contact with many people who tried to expose him to the truth. But despite his incredible education and intellect, he constantly chose the comfort of ignorance. Ravan's wife Mandodari recognized Hanumanji's strength and foresaw the devastation Sitaji's suffering would bring to their race. She tried desperately to explain to Ravan that Ram was not an ordinary human. Ravan chose to see a jealous wife and a fragile woman, rather than his loyal wife, desperate to save her husband from death. Sitaji, she had exhibited unearthly chastity and courage in facing Ravan's taunts and threats. She warned Ravan and even offered him a complete pardon from a terrible fate otherwise. Ravan chose to see a stubborn object of his lust rather than a remarkable woman worthy of respect. Having already proven his immense strength and wisdom, Hanumanji explained to Ravan the means to forego suffering and build an unrivaled legacy for him and his people. Ravan chose to see a weak monkey trying to wriggle its way out of death rather than a bona fide Satpurush. When Vibhishan, his own younger brother, responded to Ravan's request for advice with an eloquent explanation, on how to salvage everything that Ravan had worked for to that point, at an absolute minimal cost, despite how much trouble Ravan had created for himself. Ravan chose to see an ungrateful, treacherous leech, rather than a wise and virtuous younger brother. Each time Ravan rejected truth and instead gravitated to people and objects that nourished his own desires and instincts. Each time Ravan chose to gratify his ego. On the other hand, there is Vibhishan. His path was not comfortable. He had to confront the bad habits, the lifestyle, the personal shortcomings that, for years, had nourished ignorance in his life. Though it would turn his life upside down, he recognized Bhagwan and the Satpurush as worthy of complete obeisance. He would have to adopt humility. He would have to make monumental sacrifices. He would have to muster courage to confront all of the factors of his ignorance. But infused with the strength of Bhagwan, by the association with the Satpurush, Vibhishan accomplished all of these things. Ultimately, with the blessings of Bhagwan and the Satpurush, Vibhishan sat on the same throne, occupied by a man who injured him, wished to kill him, and banished him from his kingdom. May we all cultivate an aspiration to decipher truth amidst the ignorance that we encounter daily. May we develop a perspective to introspect, identify personal shortcomings that are hindering our understanding of truth, and strive to overcome them. May we be blessed with the presence of the Satpurush and welcome the message of truth that the Satpurush brings to our lives. And may we withstand the bruising it may cause to our ego and find courage to adopt change in our life that nourishes truth. And may we be inspired to create a profound relationship of mutual trust with the Satpurush, from whom we can learn our true identity as the Atma and fully come to know the Paramatma or Bhagwan. Namaste. Jai Swami.